Hello and welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and experience the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For more information, go to the website svos.org. Our guest is Susan Kraft, and Susan is an abstract and figurative artist who primarily paints on canvas, wood, and paper. From 2002 to 2007, she owned and ran Art 21 in Palo Alto. It was the largest gallery on the peninsula at the time. Art 21 was a focal point of fine art, live jazz, and poetry readings. Currently, she paints in her Redwood City studio and is president of the South Bay Area chapter of Women's Caucus for Art. She primarily shows her work in juried shows, such as SOMART's Man as Object, Reverse the Gaze. So welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you, Sally.
Yeah, and you were also the host for Talk Art before I was.
I was indeed.
Yes. So welcome back.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background in art. Where did you start and what are some of your influences?
Well, my mother remembers more than I do because I was only 3 when I picked up my first paintbrush and I painted in oil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I didn't start painting in watercolor until I got to college, which is just the opposite of what most people do. My father was a painter, and he'd been a painter for his whole life as well. And so we always had an oil painting studio in our house, and I love, love, love the smell of oil paint. The old style and the old turpentine is just...
Oh, really?
I know. It's like baked bread to most other people. Like, oh, the smell of home is oil paint.
Oil painting.
Yep.
Oh, very nice.
Yep.
And so from childhood, how did you progress?
Well, I think like a lot of artists, you know, you pick your favorite topics, and I loved horses. I rode horses, so I painted horses, and I painted dogs and trees, and then I got into people, and then I went to college and expanded, you know, took art history and so on. But after a year and a half of art school, I realized this was not a good thing for a single mother to do. So I dropped out of art school and looked around for something else that I should do that'd be a little more responsible for a single young mother.
I did the same thing.
And I got it. Well, that's how come I'm here in Silicon Valley, because it turned out I was really good at math and chemistry and physics, and I got into high tech this way. So I'm very happy to be here in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
And it's a very, very creative place. So once I became, you know, very settled down, my art was able to come back, and I did more than just sketches and things. I started painting again, and then I met. And the more I painted, the more artists I met, and the more artists I met, the more I got involved in art. And so now my life is really quite well established in both fields. And
nice.
yeah, I was very nervous about this. I'm sure that other people out here that you're watching the show have experienced the same conundrum. I'm an artist. I'm a technical person. You know, which should I do? Do I hide one from the other? No, there's so many creative, technical people here. It's very, very common. It turned out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have any teachers to help you along the way to creating art?
Well, I did. So the early part of my coming back into art, I started taking figurative drawing from Billy Odell at the Palo Alto Art Center. And she was an old-timer, and she also taught at PAL, Pacific Art League, and many other places. And she saw my work, and she said, "What are you doing behind a desk? What are you doing behind a computer? You're an artist."
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, and that really, it gave me encouragement again. I knew I was an artist, but I tried to push it away because I thought I needed to be responsible, and art wasn't responsible. Well, that's not true.
No.
You have to do what you're born to do, what you're good at, and what you love doing.
Right. Yeah.
So she was a huge encouragement to me, and I thought I would never leave her, except she left us. She passed on.
Oh.
She was an elderly lady.
So that's a wonderful story of encouragement. Good. Yeah. So what inspires you to create art these days? What is it that motivates you?
Well, currently, as time went on, I stopped painting the landscapes and the horses and so on. Although I did that well into my adulthood, I started to become more, should say more aware of current events. I was always aware of current events, but it hadn't gone into my art. It hadn't been expressed through art. And now that's what happens. I get visions of what I need to paint. And if I don't paint it, it stays in my head. And it's like a song that's stuck in your head.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that image will stay in my head until I paint it. Sometimes what happens is I'll paint one, and I think, okay, well, that's gone. And then the next one will pop up, and it's along the same theme. Or sometimes I push it, and I really determine to get a series that goes together. So recently, current events have just been flowing out and have gone onto the canvases, and I'm not working at it. I'm not trying because it's new for me to be painting about current events, and because it gets people, some people are upset, the emotions are higher from the viewer. So either they're very happy to see it and very encouraged, or they're very upset about it.
That I can believe. Well, art is meant to create conversation and to disturb you a little bit, I think.
I think so.
Definitely. So what are the media that you work in currently? What are some of the tools that you use?
Well, historically it was oil, and then watercolor, and then acrylic, but more recently I've started using beeswax.
Beeswax?
Melted beeswax. And I've gotten into, again, it's the current events, I've gotten into recycling. And so I'm saving beeswax that is wrapped around cheeses. And I've been saving it for a while. I wasn't quite sure what I was doing, but I had this big tub of squished down beeswax. And
wow.
Even though I bought encaustic materials, and I studied the encaustic books, and I talked to encaustic painters, and I'm just simply using beeswax. And I'm dipping photographs of interesting people and places around me. And so very current, I'm using my iPhone, and I'm photographing, and I print them out at Kinko's, and then I dip them in melted beeswax, and I put them on another painting that I've worked on before.
Oh, so you're doing lots of recycling.
Yeah,
excellent.
Right. Or sometimes nice. I've been doing wood too. I've gotten little pieces of wood, so that's another thing I'm doing. But that's something I'm just starting, so I don't really have a lot to say about it because I've only done maybe 3 or 4 of those.
Okay. So you brought some images with you that are recent abstractions. Is that
correct?
True? Well, let's take a look at those now, some of your abstract images.
This one is Spring in Palo Alto. This one, actually, it's from a series I did many years ago during Art 21. However, it inspired more current pieces, which you'll see next, I think. So Spring in Palo Alto, I'll talk about that a little bit. It was a series of abstractions based on geometric shapes, and I often like to use circles to represent the spiritual feeling, right? Because in amongst all the rectangular shapes we live in, houses and roads and lawns and maybe farmlands and things, and I think people are a little more round. So this one is called Goodbye, and it relates to, well, you can see behind it is a remnants of Spring in Palo Alto, and it was a duplicate of, I was inspired to paint another piece similar to Spring in Palo Alto on watercolor paper, and then I attached it to a canvas. And then I added a series of photographs from the iPhone, and I wanted to do a piece on patterns that I saw currently. So if we look at it more closely, you'll see that the patterns are little stickies, and those stickies were on the Apple Store a couple of weeks after Steve Jobs died. And the stickies say things like, "I sad," or "Goodbye, Steve," or human engineering, things, just having the personal notes about Steve. And it was very sweet. The whole window, I don't know if you got to see Palo Alto, the Apple Store, the whole window of the entire front of the store was covered, absolutely covered, from top to bottom, from left to right, in these little stickies. So I took photos and printed them out and dipped them in beeswax and put them on top of the painting.
Right on. Oh, it's a beautiful piece.
Thank you. This one is called Chicken Gumball, and this is also current events, and it's a painting of a farm field, and I abstracted the farm field. So one way is looking at the horizon, and the other way, as you get closer to the bottom of the canvas, it looks like an aerial view from a plane. But in the foreground is a gumball filled with chicks, little chicks. And in the background, I took black paint on top of the farm area where the buildings are, and then I sprayed it a solvent so the paint dripped, and it made it look grimy because I wanted to talk about factory farming. And the chicks are treated like live food, or like they're already food and they're being dispensed. I've seen movies and read stories about how live farm animals are being treated like they're not living creatures, and it's very disturbing to me. So this is a very concentrated image of that emotional feeling I have about it and thoughts I have about it.
Yeah, it definitely looks dark, and the dripping, sort of melting. It's a beautiful piece.
Thank you.
So, in your pieces, you have such beautiful backgrounds, and you talked about recycling canvases a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your philosophies on recycling canvases and how you do that.
Okay. Well, Chicken Gumball is one of those, actually. I had a whole series of these farm pieces. I'm from the Midwest. I also lived in Half Moon Bay, where there's farming out there as well. And there were a few pieces, this one in particular that's the basis of Gumball, not the basis, but the underpainting of Gumball, that I didn't think it was successful. And so it was sitting in my studio, put away, and I realized at a certain point that I need to recycle everything, not just my trash from what I bring into the house. So, and that's why I was saving the little waxes. So I decided that I needed to recycle these paintings, and I could use them because there was already a lot of texture and a lot of color and thought that went into the form. And so I came up with I just would look at it for a while and meditate on it and think, and maybe I would come up with an image in my dreams, or I'd come up with just an image would pop in my head. And Chicken Gumball, I really can't tell you why that showed up.
Well, it's very descriptive, and the way you describe it and the philosophy behind it, it definitely makes sense. So you put the Chicken Gumball over
a
the
painting
that was already there.
that I'd painted 4 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's a great idea. So as you grow and you become more complex in your thinking, then your paintings become more complex.
And the same thing with Goodbye.
Right.
The piece on Steve Jobs, well, the Apple Store actually.
Right.
That was a piece where I thought it would be okay to reference one of my own paintings that was a very successful awarded painting, and then put it on watercolor paper, because I had probably like 400 sheets left, because I all of a sudden abandoned watercolor and got onto canvas, and I just couldn't do watercolor anymore. And I thought, well, I'm going to put it on a canvas because I don't want to frame watercolor anymore. That was one of the reasons why I moved away.
Right, framing.
So I thought, well, I'll just glue this on a canvas, and then I can just hang the canvas. Well, it didn't work out because the canvas was 2 inches wider than the paper, so then I had these white strips, and it looked horrible. I thought, oh, what a bad idea! But I didn't. I didn't want to destroy it. So then I came up with the idea of the Goodbye piece, and it all kind of just came together. So it just like one of those things is aha! Oh, this is what I can do, and I think it's a very successful painting.
Oh, good. I do too. It's beautiful. So you not only are an artist, you have been a gallery owner in Palo Alto. Art 21 was a very successful, large gallery. And so tell us a little bit about the perspective of the gallery owner and how artists deal with gallery owners.
Okay. Well, what I learned a lot in the gallery, that's for certain, as an artist opening a gallery, was that first of all, as a gallery owner, you could spot an artist walking in a mile away because they're hovering around the edge, and they're glancing a little over at the gallery owner, and they're very nervous. Usually people are not nervous when they walk into a gallery because what's there to be nervous about? Well, they're nervous because they've got this power structure built in their own head.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be that way. In fact, it's not very fun for a gallery owner to engage themselves with an artist who's afraid of them.
Well, that makes sense.
Who's very nervous and has this complicated idea about what they think is going on. And it's a very simple thing. The gallery owner is a human being who loves art, who's trying to do business. You as an artist are a human being who loves art, who's trying to do business. And that's what you have in common.
Right.
So you really, there shouldn't be a hierarchical sort of division between you two. There is, of course, you know, at the higher echelons, but then you're a higher echelon artist, you're bringing in lots of money and clients as well. So whatever level you're at, that's the gallery that you're working for, maybe the next level up because you're, you know, they found you, right, and they want to show you off. But when you want to, this is my advice for artists. Do you want to hear my advice for artists?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We all do.
This is for my advice for artists. If you'd like to be in a gallery, and it's a lot of work to be in a gallery, you know.
Yes.
All right, it's a relationship, and it's a complicated relationship because you need to make sure they're paying attention to you, and you need to pay attention to them. And they're human beings, so they want to be treated with respect. They want to like you, and you want to like them because you're going to spend time with them. So before you engage and sign a contract with them, you want to make sure you like the space, and you like the other artists they pick, and you like the way they have their shows. So you need to go and do some reconnaissance work and go to as many shows as you can, as often as you can. Because if that's what you're going to be, a gallery artist, you have to live a gallery artist life, and that's go there and learn how to meet and greet, be comfortable meeting people. A gallery artist does not want, a gallery owner doesn't want an artist who can't say hello to people and stick their hand out and say, hi, nice to meet you. My name is, and this is my work, and let me tell you about my work.
Right.
You know, if you just stand in the corner reading a book because you're afraid of people, then you know it's not going to work out for you. Then you need to. There's other ways for your art to get out, maybe through things like some art organizations, and so you don't have to be in a gallery. Galleries are not the end all, really. Is what I want to say.
Yeah. So you would recommend then getting to know the space, getting to know the ambiance and what the gallery owner's tastes are before you even address the issue of business.
Right.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
And once you decide that you'd like to maybe be there, try to be in that gallery, ask them, how do you review artists' work? Never, ever cold call. Don't just throw a bunch of slides together and send it to a gallery with a letter or a CD. So they may or may not look at it. I doubt they will. Same thing with museums. There's no way a museum's going to pick you out of the crowd, you know.
Right.
So don't do that.
Well, yeah.
Just don't. By the way, speaking of galleries, museums, the Triton Museum, I'm going to give a little plug for them. Once a month, you can make an appointment with the Triton Museum in Santa Clara to bring your artwork down, and the top, either George Rivera, or Preston Metcalf, who is his assistant #1 guy there. They will sit down with you for an hour and look at your artwork and tell you what they think. And just so they get to know you. And the same thing, if you want to get into a museum, you got to go to their openings and get to know the museum people because they're inundated with work.
Right. Oh,
and they'll think of, who do I want in my gallery? Who do I want in my museum?
Right.
And they'll think of you because they know you.
So you have worn many hats in the Bay Area, and you're a wonderful artist and been in lots of shows. Briefly tell us a little bit about the South Bay Area chapter of the Women's Caucus for Arts, because I know you're involved in women's issues. We want to get into that. So
thank you. Yes, and that also came as a surprise to me. I was kind of like I guess I was a feminist without really trying to be. You know, when I dropped out of art school, I went down to Kentucky because I liked horses. I told you that, and I broke race horses.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I went to Alaska to become a geophysicist. You know, and I was out there. Was the first. Second woman to graduate with a bachelor's in geophysics from Fairbanks, Alaska. And I climbed mountains, you know, with you know, not with mountain gear, just because that's what they did.
So you were a feminist in your life.
But I didn't set out to say, I'm going to do this because this is what a woman needs to be able to do. I just did it because I didn't really see a boundary that I needed to break. It just was there because I like to do it. So when people say, are you a feminist? Like, I guess in my life I am, but I'm not an activist.
Right.
So all of a sudden...
But you're involved in the Women's Caucus for the Arts. What is that?
Well, I want to tell you why I got there, because these paintings, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the paintings I started painting, these current news paintings about women's issues, and they approached me and said, you need to join us, our local chapter. Your work would fit very well. We'd like to have your work involved in what we're doing.
So these paintings are about women wearing burqas.
Yeah.
And you quote a very famous artist, Francis Bacon, in them, and sort of in the backgrounds and the ambiance and some of the colors that you choose. So let's take a look at some of those images now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Francis Bacon. He did several pieces. He did a whole series of these men in boxes, and they were simple white lines that gave the viewer a feeling that you were in the same room with them. That's what some of the reviewers say. I think it's to show that the artist was showing that the person he was painting was confined in a room, confined in a box. So
yeah, either physical or spiritual. I mean,
correct.
Colors.
Right,
So
exactly.
Let's take a look at your painting and see how they relate.
This one is called Unseen, Unheard, and it's a woman in one of the severest burqas, and she is also in a room, but using the same lines that Francis Bacon did, except in her room she has a window, which is also very simply done, similar to Francis Bacon's style. And for me, I saw her as being able to, if she could turn around and look, she'd see there was an escape, or at least a window to look out and see the rest of the world. But she's looking forward, so I don't know if she'll ever do that or not. Some of the other pieces I did after that, and this was the first one I did in this series. This one, she's gone. She still has the window, but you can barely see it in this slide. But she's basically she's shrunk down to a skeleton, and because she's still in that room. She can't get out, and she's covered up, and no one can see her, and she's not emoting and not able to do what she's been put on this earth to do. These burqas are really symbolic. Yes, they are bad, and they withhold women from life and their society, but I really painted them more as symbolic gestures. I felt like I had done that to myself, especially with my art. Right, I covered myself in the science cloak, and didn't allow my art self to come out. This one is the face behind the mask. It's a rather large piece. It's here on the set, and it is a woman who's got her high heels on, and they're peeking out from underneath the burqa. And then I put a big face behind it as well, and it was a Chuck Close style of face. And it was very large, and I wanted to just say there's a real person under there. See me. And recognize, if you can't see me, just know that there is a person who likes some style and has a personality.
Lots of emotion in the colors that you chose and the style.
And that also has the black, runny, grimy look. And I think it's more of a black tears. It was more of a surprise, actually. I thought it was going to be just a technique that abstract artists use to have a two-dimensional surface with the runniness, and it turned out to be a nice surprise. Yeah. This one is a hidden life wearing heels, and it's a similar one. It's an older woman's face, because I wanted to show you might end up being underneath your cloak, whatever you cloak yourself in, for your whole life.
But the colors are so vibrant, and your burqa is what you cloak yourself in. Or what you have the women cloak themselves in is so vibrant. Yes. You can't see the woman, but you can see the outer
You can get pretty
picture.
Fancy.
Yeah.
I got a couple of degrees in geophysics. That's pretty fancy.
Yes.
I had a lot of people fooled. And this one is, this was the last piece I did in this series, and it took me the longest, actually. I worked on it and reworked it a few times. And this is a young woman as a bride, barefoot bride, who walked over a burning bridge, or she burned her bridges. I'm not sure or maybe that's hell, I'm not sure. And she's got a cloak over her arm, so that's a burqa, or maybe it's the Virgin Mary and her, is different, the opposite colors. But she definitely is a bride, and she definitely left, and she's waiting, and she's thinking she's going to go to the right, but she's still looking to the left. She's still looking behind her. And if she looked over her shoulder, she'd see the path over the stream and up the mountain to enlightenment.
So you can see through the window now.
Yeah.
Yes, so
That's
it's
right.
somewhat of a personal process for you as well through these paintings.
I think when I finally finished it, I said to my good friend from the gallery, I think that's me. That was Jill Andre, and she said, of course it is, Susan. We all knew that.
Well, those are beautiful paintings. Thank you. Yes. I like the way that you really work with shadow in the different colors that you use, and just very vibrant colors. I love colors myself, so
it's funny.
work.
I never wear vibrant colors.
Well,
I wear black, gray, brown, and white. Except today. Except today. Today I decided I'd better do something to make me look like I belong to my paintings.
so now you're bringing the inside out. The inside is
There you go.
colorful.
There you go. That's
There
right.
you go.
That's right. Mhm.
Yeah. So you try to create emotion in your paintings, and tell us a little bit about the challenges that you face when you have an emotion and you want to paint it.
The challenge, well, that's really a hard question to answer. I know we've talked about it earlier. It's, I will try with what I do is I actually get into a mode of, like a metaphysical mode when I'm painting, and that comes out the best. I have a feeling that viewers can tell when you're just dialing it in, because you're just doing you know how to use the work, you use your paints and your brushes. But if you are actually emotional when you're painting, the viewers can tell and they react. It's almost like a recording. You know, you can tell when somebody's singing with real emotion versus just going through the scales. And you react, your scalp gets tingly and you well up and your eyes well up.
Yeah.
I've seen people cry at paintings in my gallery. And I know what the story is behind those paintings, and it's a one-for-one match. But that person has to be on that wavelength. The viewer has to be on the wavelength of the
receptive to
yeah.
it. So but that's the intent, and the color choices and the images. So they're beautiful work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being on Talk Art again. It's been a pleasure talking about your art.
Thank you. So you can shake hands.
Yes, I can.
Put my hand out and shake hands.
I can tell people who I am.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, beautiful artwork.
Thank you. Do we say goodbye? Bye, everybody.